You're listening to Retail Remix, your inside access to candid conversations with the people shaping retail's future. Here's your host, Alicia Esposito.
Everyone loves a good story about a good customer experience, especially when we talk about the store. But what I've come to realize is that we tend to focus so much on the glitz of it all. The standout technology, the incredible design and aesthetic. And don't get me wrong, that is very much important. But what I've learned is that behind every incredible in-store experience is an even better store operation strategy. Now that includes everything from processes to procedures to how the store is set up and managed to how the store integrates effectively with all of a brand's other marketing channels and commerce channels and even inventory levels. And the more you think about it and the more you peel back the layers, the more you realize that all of these things are incredibly interconnected. That's why I wanted to sit down with someone who is helping shape store operation strategies and store procedures for some incredible, fast-growing brands. Rebekah Kondrat, founder and managing partner of Rekon Retail. Now, we sat down for our Retail Think Tank Ideation Sessions because honestly, we get into a lot of examples, real-life case studies and partnerships, and how Rebekah and her team have been able to take her experiences working for brands like Apple, Starbucks, Warby Parker, and how she's been able to translate those experiences into a consistent and scalable model for developing a store experience and store operation strategy for even the newest brands who are completely novice and green to this whole brick and mortar thing and don't even know where to start. And Rebekah has a way of breaking down these concepts, ideas, and best practices so they're not so overwhelming. Listen in to this special exclusive peek to this ideation session. And if you like what you hear, please be sure to go to the Think Tank Hub. We'll link it in the show notes because not only will you get 20 plus more minutes of incredible insights and takeaways from Rekon Retail's client base, but you'll also see some great images and examples of some of the work that they've been able to bring to life. The big reason why I was especially excited to have you on is because we cover so much about the in-store experience, even store design, like the creative aspects, but of course, operations, all of the tactical behind-the-scenes stuff. That's really what makes these great stores come to life. And you have an incredible career in stores working for brands like Apple, Starbucks, Warby Parker, all brands that I personally love. But I guess my question for you is, what do you love most about just being in this industry, being in retail, and of course, in the store space specifically?
Yeah. So something that we say is retail is magic. And you'll kind of see that throughout, some of our copy on our website, et cetera. And that's really kind of springs from the belief that it can change someone's day, like a physical retail environment, a great experience can change someone's day. It could, spark a new idea. And of course, commerce is so important to the world. And it is a very substantial part of what makes us all tick. We all need to go into stores and buy things. And sometimes it's utility and sometimes it's entertainment. You got to get lotion, but you also want to get that fancy dress. So I think there's just something about the human to human interaction that happens in stores that's kind of that like magical moment where a customer, starts to either think about themselves differently or even just something as simple as like, I got something I needed today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the brands I mentioned before, they are especially known for how they think about the in-store experience in both of those aspects, right? Like Starbucks has been able to really master that mobile-driven experience, right, to make it very fast and easy, whereas Warby Parker and Apple, it's very, in many aspects, very high touch and all about being immersed into the brand and into the products. But regardless, they're all really known for knowing their audience and kind of mastering that experience. And I guess my question there is, what about your experience working for these brands ultimately inspired you or motivated you even to start Rekon? Were there any through lines or areas that you were like, oh, I really think there's an opportunity here that is possibly overlooked or under-tapped right now?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to have some pretty amazing experience at Apple and Starbucks. I mean, these brands are, I guess, what you would consider to be legacy brands, right? They're not startups by any stretch of the imagination. They had systems and processes in place for operations, which is something that we at Rekon are very passionate about. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about. But, they also had that aspect of like customer experience and how do we train a large team to give a consistent customer experience every single time? How do we think through how the inventory is received so that then we can get it out to the customer faster? Like all of those like nuts and bolts, infrastructure and like scalability, all of that was learned there. And then when I went over to Warby Parker, which at the time was kind of one of the first D2C brands, like, oh, we sold online and now we're building stores and now we're expanding stores. And at the time when I joined, they only had 3 stores open, right? So it was very early on. There was this kind of, now I get to see what it's like to build something from the beginning, right? Like the company, of course, existed and the product was already great, but they had never done retail before. And so to enter into that environment and see, oh, you don't have any of these standards and processes like Apple had, like Starbucks had, right? And so now we get to build this, but we're not just going to take like a carbon copy of Apple's policies and plop it into Warby Parker. That doesn't work. It's a totally different business. And so really having to think critically about, what's best for this specific brand in its current place, in its journey to kind of becoming that like lifestyle brand, right? That $100 million brand is kind of seems to be the benchmark of achievement these days, right? So once I did that for Warby, I then went on to Outdoor Voices, again, very early on, and found that they were tackling the same problems, even though it was a totally different industry, right? Eyewear, apparel, like, not quite the same. One was quite technical and one was more like fun, recreational, but the problems were the same. They still had to build the infrastructure. They still had to make standard operating procedures. And so after doing that a couple of times, and then after Outdoor Voices, I went to Joybird Furniture, which was also, again, another D2C furniture brand, now acquired by Lazy Boy, same problems. And I was like, hold on, I see a through line here. These brands need help, and they need help really at these kind of early stages, either retail entry or retail expansion. And that's kind of where the impetus for Rekon Retail was born. Was there needs to be some entity that comes alongside these brands as a trusted partner, as an embedded resource that can help them kind of grow into the place where they can then hire an in-house team, right? Because that needs to happen eventually. We believe that very strongly, is that if a brand sees retail as a substantial part of its growth trajectory, eventually it needs to fully own the channel. It needs to have a VP of retail, or, whatever that looks like for the brand, a district manager, some sort of multi-unit manager needs to have those functions in-house. But until they have that, until they're able to do that, until they make enough revenue to do that, until they have enough bandwidth to do that, they need a trusted partner. And as far as I can tell, one did not exist. And so I made it.
And now you're here. Yeah.
Here we are.
When in doubt, make it, right?
There you go.
So with that, I mean, incredible context. And I think the fact that you have had experience on both sides, so to speak, with a few legacy brands that have the teams, the procedures, the operations, and you were able to, look for the gaps for these smaller brands, especially the ones that are maybe so new. They're like, we don't really know what the future of this store strategy is going to look like, how many stores we're going to have, what that team should look like. It's great that you can kind of help close those gaps. But, you noted the fact that every brand is different, of course. Every category has its nuances, especially when it comes to standing up an in-store experience. So how do you and your partner, Libby Shani, go into each project? Like, are there any standard questions you ask? Is there a framework, so to speak, that kind of guides your approach and how you help the client go through those early stages or phases of the project?
Yeah. So we always start off, and I will say this about Libby, we have very similar backgrounds and a complementary skill set. I mean, she is the operations master, but also comes from great brands like Chanel and Figs and Container Store, and, brands known for not only customer experience, but also operations. So there's this really nice synergy. And we always approach the first project with a brand with an audit. And that sometimes is quite extensive, right? We need to look into what systems you currently have. What is your personnel structure? Because chances are, if a brand has never had a retail store before, they don't have anyone on staff who has ever really even worked in a retail store. I mean, maybe they worked at McDonald's when they were a teenager, but has never actually worked in retail, So we kind of do a full audit to see where are you at? What are the resources that we can tap into that you might not know about? What is the tech stack that you're using currently to help us inform what point of sale system we should use, what traffic counting system we should use, those kinds of things. And then we also seek to understand the pillars of the brand experience, right? Because it's one thing to put branding on your website and you have a color palette and a logo that's recognizable and a font and even copy that is very specific to the brand, the ethos of the brand comes out in that way. Now, when you move all of that into the physical, it's great to start there. You need your colors, you need a logo, you need copy, signage, etc. But now it's, what do you want your customer to feel and how do we help them feel it through the experience that your in-store associates are giving to them, right? And so that's what we always look to understand first is, what is your current infrastructure? Let's do an audit. And then what is your actual desired customer experience and what is the purpose of your store, right? Is it to, obviously it's to make money. Hopefully we believe in stores that make money. We don't believe in stores as loss leaders, but is it to better understand your customer? Is it to develop new products? Is it to convert a different type of customer, right? You have a belief that maybe you're missing this whole customer and you need to actually work to talk to that customer. So that's kind of where we start off. And then we create pretty bespoke offerings for brands based on the findings so that we can then help them get to that point where retail is that substantial part of their growth.
Well, that's it for this teaser, everyone. Again, be sure to go to the show notes, click the link focused on Retail Think Tank, and be sure to subscribe to get access to the entire hub. Not only will you be able to watch this ideation session in full, but you'll also get anytime, anywhere access to all of the other great content, high value content, and in some cases exclusive content right from the Think Tank Hub. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time.